Your fabric crafting is about to get a serious upgrade, and if you're ready to truly level up your DIY game, then you're exactly where you need to be. In today's video, I'm going to be revealing 10 genius hacks. It's going to completely transform how you create with fabric. We're going to print directly on fabric. We're going to make paper feel like fabric. We're going to create some custom ribbons. We're going to waterproof fabric, and we're going to even decoupage some lampshades with fabric. So come on, let's get crafting. This is what I'm going to use for this technique. I picked up this burlap. It was $3.99, and I picked up a pillowcase. I like picking up pillowcases for just the fabric. This one was $1.49, and I think the blue tag is 25% off. So I'm going to cut that one up and use it, and I'm going to show you how to do graphics onto fabric using mailing sheet labels. This is so cool, so hang tight. I'm going to add a fabric graphic on the front of this basket that I picked up at the thrift store. And I have this frame, and I'm going to use a burlap and put a beautiful quote on it in the middle of this. I'm going to work on the picture frame first. So I have to see what size of burlap I want. And this frame on the inside is 9 by 12. And I want the burlap a little bit smaller. So I think I'm going to cut it about 7.5 by 10. I want the edges to have this frayed look like this. So I'm just going to, this is actually my little Cricut tool, and I'm just going to pull away along the edges so I can have that frayed look on all sides. I've got it all cut to size, and now I'm just going to take my iron and just press it so it's nice and flat. And I have both pieces ready to start the iron-on transfer. I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat. You can use gloss, just remember you're going to have a glossy finish, or you can also use the fabric Mod Podge. If you use a fabric, then you'll be able to wash it in the washing machine, but these aren't going to be washed, so I'm just going to use my Mod Podge mat. And you want to put a liberal coat over all of the fabric and put it right out to the edges so it doesn't fray anymore. And I have both pieces of fabric on a piece of parchment paper. That way it won't stick to your table and you're protecting your work surface. I've got them both completely coated with the Mod Podge. I'm gonna set them aside and let them dry completely. These have both completely dried, and now I'm going to put a second coat of the Mod Podge on them. Now, this is the secret ingredient to do your transfer. These are old CD labels. I found them at the thrift store for $2.99. They're the exact same thing as mailing labels. What you actually want is you want the carrier sheet underneath. You want that plastic sheet. So you're going to take off all the labels, and this is the sheet that you want underneath. Now you can find these sheets at an office supply store. Sometimes you can find them in the dollar store, but I always find them in the thrift store because people don't use the CD labels anymore, the mailing labels that much. So check around and see where you can pick them up. Make sure when you're printing on the shiny side and feed it into your printer properly. I have the graphics all printed out. I made sure that you reverse the text. Otherwise, when you put it on your project, it'll be backwards. And this will only work on a laser jet printer. It will not work on an inkjet printer because of the different variations of ink. So I've got the big one printed, and then the other one, you have to make sure that you don't touch the ink either, because it will smear. So we're just about ready to put it on our project. Okay, these both have 2 coats of Mod Podge put on them, completely dry. Now, I have tried to do this technique just the way it is right now and do the iron-on transfer. It will work sometimes, but it wasn't 100% of the time. What I do find works the best is if I just take another light coat of Mod Podge and put it on top and then iron on while this Mod Podge is still a little bit tacky. The iron-on transfer works much better. Okay, you want to put a towel down and then keep your parchment paper underneath this. Otherwise, if you just put this on a towel and then you ironed it, you're going to have it ironed to your towel. So we've got just a light coat of the Mod Podge that's still wet, it's still damp, and we're going to lay that graphic right where we want it. Try not to touch the graphics. Exactly where you want it. Make sure it's centered really well. And then you're going to take another piece of parchment paper and lay it on top. And you're just going to iron on your graphic. This is on the highest setting with no steam. And you're just going to take your iron and just slowly go up and down. Let that Mod Podge and that ink melt together. Now it may sizzle a little bit because that Mod Podge is wet, but that's okay. It dries really quickly. So you want to keep ironing back and forth until all of that Mod Podge is completely dry. Now you want to let it completely dry before you pull this off. And you can just lift it a little bit and see if it's transferring well. And if it isn't, fold it back down, put the parchment paper back on top, and then just give it another iron. It might take a little bit to get all that ink transferred, but you just can keep checking. And then when you feel that it's all transferred and you completely let it cool, then you can pull off that top carrier paper. Okay, this is completely cooled. That's really important to make sure that you let it cool completely before you peel it off. That way you're gonna know that the transfer has all stuck down. So here it goes. Oh, this is so cool. And there you have it. Now you can see there was a little bit of ink that didn't transfer down here, but that's okay because I think it looks really rustic and I love that look. Okay, now we're ready to do this one. Same process. We're going to put a little bit of Mod Podge on the top so it's wet. And then we're going to lay the graphic on top of it. Make sure that it's centered exactly where you want it. And then we're going to iron it. Okay, now this is all pressed and cooled down really well. And actually this method works really, really well on a smooth cotton fabric. It's a little bit more difficult on that burlap that I did to get it so you could see how some of it didn't transfer very well. But on this type of fabric, it works fantastic. So I'm just gonna slowly peel it away. And you can see how there's no ink left. It transferred really well. And look at that. I picked up this frame at the thrift store, paid a couple dollars for it, and I then spray painted it black, put it in my little to-do corner, and I think what I want to do is I want to distress it a little bit and not make it such a flat black color. So I'm going to go ahead and just sand along the whole outside of the frame. Okay, and this is ready to put into the frame. I am going to put some of my homemade Mod Podge on the back of it to glue it in. And then I'm also going to use my hot glue gun a little bit just in the corners to hold it in place while it dries. And I'm going to do the same process to put it on the basket. And there you have a really simple, easy way to transfer your graphics or your photos. This will even work with photos printed on your LaserJet printer onto those carrier sheets to create fantastic pieces of fabric to use on your crafting projects. I have both of these graphics in my Etsy store. If you're interested in purchasing them, make sure you use the code SAVE50 and you'll get 50% off all of the graphics in my store. Today I'm excited to share with you a DIY recipe for waterproof Mod Podge and how you can use it in your crafting projects. Whether you're making outdoor decor, fabric crafts, or functional items, this waterproof Mod Podge alternative is going to add durability, water resistance to your creations. To make your waterproof Mod Podge, you're going to need some Elmer's school glue, some clear 100% silicone. I found mine at Walmart, but you can also find it at Amazon or your local hardware store. A little bit of water, a sponge or a palette knife, and a dish along with a spoon that you keep just in your craft room and is not used in your kitchen. You're going to take that Elmer's school glue and add 1 tablespoon to the dish. You can also use the clear school glue or PVA glue, whatever you have, and you can even use Mod Podge if you have that in your craft room. But if you want a more affordable product, use a school glue, it works well. Then we're going to use that 100% silicone, and we're going to do equal amounts. So 1 tablespoon of the silicone added to that school glue. Now you want to incorporate that glue and silicone together really well. It takes a little bit to get them mixed together, so just take your time and make sure it's nice and smooth when you're finished. Now this is where you can add a little bit of water. I'm using about a teaspoon and adding it to the glue and silicone mixture. You want to be really careful not to add too much water because it's going to take away from the waterproof properties of this mixture. So use it sparingly. We're adding just enough water so that it can be applied onto our project easier and it's going to flow on better. This is the right consistency for applying to your project. Ensure you're using a paintbrush and dishes dedicated to crafting because silicone is not food grade and will dry hard, making it difficult to clean your brush and your dishes. Today I'm going to demonstrate this project using one of my homemade DIY napkins and a piece of cotton fabric. You need to use something that's going to absorb that mixture. If you're using a material where the waterproofing solution won't soak in, it won't work. I have a full tutorial on how to make your own DIY napkins. I'll put the link right here that you can scan, or you can find it below in the description. This is a perfect project to test this waterproof Mod Podge on. I've also designed this graphic and it's available in my Etsy store. I love the vintage feel of it and I've cut it off of this piece of computer paper. And there we have created our own DIY napkin that we can now apply to the fabric using the waterproof homemade Mod Podge. Now I want to make sure that I have the napkin exactly where I want it after I put on that Mod Podge waterproof solution. So I'm going to be marking the 4 corners to see where to lay it afterwards. Now we're going to stir that mixture again, and I like to apply it using a sponge. You can also use a palette knife, a credit card, or if you have an old paintbrush that you don't care about, you can use that too. Otherwise, it's just going to have to get thrown out. I'm going to place it in between those 4 corners and make sure that that waterproof Mod Podge gets soaked right through that fabric. Before using this waterproof Mod Podge alternative on your project, it's essential to conduct a small piece on a scrap piece of material or on the project you're going to be using it on to make sure that it's going to work and give you the desired waterproofing level. You can use this waterproof Mod Podge alternative on so many different crafting projects, including outdoor decor, flower pots, fabric crafts, paper crafts, jewelry making, holiday decorations, upcycled projects that you want to keep outside. So many possibilities. I've completely covered the fabric where we're going to place that napkin, and I'm going to gently press it down into the mixture, using my fingers to smooth out any bubbles and wrinkles. I also like to use a bit of saran wrap to prevent any ripping or tearing if I press too hard. Just pat it up and down to smooth it out and ensure a nice finish without tearing that napkin. While this waterproof Mod Podge alternative is great for making your crafts more durable and water resistant, it might not survive the washing machine. It's best to gently wash items by hand using soap and water, avoid soaking them for too long, and gently pat them dry. If you think you're going to be washing them a lot or exposing them to tough conditions, consider a fabric sealant made for waterproofing and washing instead. I let that sit for about 15 or 20 minutes, and now I'm going back in and I'm sponging on a top coat, spreading it evenly across the top of the napkin, trying to reach the edges. If we don't seal it around the edge, it could possibly lift and peel away, so we want to make sure we're getting that Mod Podge waterproof alternative right out to the edge of the napkin and applying it liberally across that whole project. In addition to the steps we've covered, here are a few extra pointers to ensure your best results. First, allow the project to dry completely before handling it to prevent any smudges or smears. Depending on the thickness of the application, drying time may vary, but generally allowing it to dry overnight is a good practice once you're all finished. For optimal waterproofing, consider applying multiple coats, allowing each layer to dry thoroughly before adding the next. Be sure to store any leftover mixture in an airtight container to prevent it from drying out, and you can use it later. When cleaning your brushes or sponges after use, wash them thoroughly with warm soapy water, as a silicone component can harden if you leave it to dry. Warm soapy water can help remove silicone, but it will not remove it entirely. For thorough cleaning, you may need to use a solvent specifically designed to dissolve silicone, such as mineral spirits or rubbing alcohol. As you can see, I let this dry, and now I'm going in and putting on a second coat to ensure that it's going to withstand water and repel it. I love using this formula for coating plant pots that I'm going to keep outside in the elements. It allows you to have pretty flower pots that won't melt away from rain, moisture, or extreme heat. It's been 24 hours, and here is our graphic on this piece of cotton fabric. It's durable and flexible now. The silicone component in it gives it a bit of a slippery feel on the top. As you can see, I put it under water and it's repelling the water, it's bubbling off and not soaking through. I live in Canada, so this isn't an issue for me, but if you have exposure to really strong sunlight or UV, this can cause it to degrade over time. This means it may not work as well in repelling water and keeping your projects protected. If you're using it for outdoor crafts in that type of an area with lots of sun, keep it in mind. Maybe adding extra layers of the mixture or using a UV resistant sealant on top instead might work better for you. As you can see, it's covered in water. I'm just taking the cloth and wiping that water right off the top, and it's not affecting the graphic on the cotton. This is such a fun DIY for you to try out and add to your to-do list in your craft room. Paper that feels like fabric. Imagine soft textured sheets, perfect for collage, mixed media, journaling, or any DIY project. Today we're making Momagami paper, a Japanese technique for creating fabric-like paper from scratch. This technique takes regular paper and transforms it into beautiful soft sheets with a fabric-like feel. No fancy equipment needed, just a few simple steps. And here's a few of the fabric paper pieces that I made: magazine sheets, regular computer paper. This is a journal that I made, and the cover is a piece of that fabric-like paper, and I love it because you can even sew it. It is so fantastic. It's soft, it's pliable. This is scrapbooking paper, and this piece I sewed on also. So many neat ideas that you can do with this. I'm going to show you how you can make it. First example, I'm going to use a piece of scrapbooking paper. I've got a squirt bottle with just warm water in it, and I'm just going to gently mist that piece of paper. It helps to make it flexible. And then I have my brayer, and I'm just going to press that water into that paper, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it sit for about 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes, and now we're just going to start to fold that paper in. I like to work from the edges and just keep folding until you come to the middle. Not all paper works the same way for this technique. Thinner paper, like the kind you use in your printer, is perfect. Papers with a little bit of texture, like watercolor paper, or even leftover scraps of paper you're going to recycle, can be used. You want to stay away from super thick paper or shiny paper because they're just too stiff and too slippery. You want to work carefully. You don't want to rip the paper, so just go slow. This is actually kind of a relaxing technique. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and enjoy the process. Once I have it completely folded all up, I just like to scrunch it in my hands. And because we dampened it just a little bit with that water, it softened the fibers in the paper and it started the process of turning this into a fabric-like paper. And here's where the technique can differ from person to person and what you like to use. Myself, I like to use a little bit of olive oil. I rub it into my hands and it just makes the paper a little more pliable. I've also seen people use coconut oil, hair conditioner, hand cream, lots of different techniques. This is just one that I prefer, but experiment with your paper and see what works best for you. I find you don't need very much. I just put a little bit on my hands and rub it into the paper. If you use too much, it just softens the paper and I find that it rips really easy. This isn't the only name for this technique. Because of its unique fabric-like texture, it's also sometimes called Japanese paper cloth or even paper leather. No matter what you call it, the fun part is creating this soft paper from ordinary scraps. This technique has been around for hundreds of years. Back then, people who made books, or better known as bookbinders, used a similar trick to create thin, strong paper for the inside of books. Over time, this technique has become more than just a book thing, and people started using it for all kinds of crafts. You want to keep just manipulating that paper, putting a little bit of olive oil on your hands, rubbing it in, and then scrunching that paper up. It does take time. It's something that you can probably do sitting in front of the TV or your computer watching a YouTube video. And in between, I like to take my brayer, roll the paper out flat. It helps spread out those paper fibers and make it easier to scrunch up. Use your oil sparingly. I got a little bit too much in the middle of the paper, but that's okay. When you set it aside, it dries and you won't notice it much. And you might find you have little rips here and there. That does happen. Just take your time and you're going to create some beautiful paper. This one's almost done. I'm going to set it aside and I'm going to let it dry completely. The next type of paper that I'm going to work on is a page out of a National Geographic. I wanted to show you this because it's a bit thicker, it's glossy, it's not quite as easy to do, but it can be done. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on my hands and again, just start folding up the paper, manipulating it. Now, we could have sprayed a little bit of water on this, but it doesn't soak up the water because it's so glossy. So I skipped this step on the magazine page. Here's the magazine page all finished. It has a fabric-like feel, but it's kind of glossy. I really like it, and I think it's going to be great to add into some of my junk journals. Now I'm just going to do a regular piece of computer paper. Again, going to put a little bit of that olive oil on my hands and just start scrunching up that paper. The reason I choose to use the olive oil is I find that the coconut oil or hand cream is quite greasy as you're applying it on the paper, and it's really hard to get rid of that greasy feel. And I do find sometimes it transfers onto my projects also. I find the olive oil absorbs into the paper better. That's why it's my go-to. That's how easy it is to make Momagami paper. This is one that I printed on afterwards with my laser printer, and I sewed an edge around it with my sewing machine. It works fantastic. This is just the regular piece of computer paper. You can see it's almost kind of flexible. And my magazine sheet, love this. This is going to go into my junk journaling. And I also made a little booklet, and I used a piece of that paper as the cover of the booklet. sewed it all together. I used one of my fabric transfers on the front of it. This is going to make a great gift for my niece, actually. She loves to journal. It's homemade paper on the inside too. And here's some pieces of scrapbooking paper. This is another piece that I sewed a strip on. Try this technique. Have fun with it. Let me know down in the comments what you end up creating. Dive into the amazing world of fabric paper. This material is perfect for countless projects, book covers, gift tags, embellishments, wrapping paper. The possibilities are endless. To make this fabric paper, you're going to need a piece of cotton or a lightweight material like muslin or linen, along with some Elmer's glue, which is PVA glue, or Mod Podge. I actually prefer Mod Podge for this fabric paper, but whatever you have in your stash will work fine. And then you're going to mix it together, a 50-50 ratio with water. If you don't mix it in this ratio, when you apply it to the fabric, napkin, or paper on top, it's going to have a tendency to rip or tear really easily. So you want to make sure that it's quite liquid. I'm going to be doing this project on a non-stick baking sheet. I have that down on my table. And then on top of that, I have a piece of cotton. And this is just a big piece of cotton that I bought at the thrift store. It's got some coffee stains on it. It's going to be perfect. And then I'm using 1 ply of a napkin. I never throw out this piece because I always make custom napkins, and I'm going to show you later on in the video how I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to take this mixture and I'm going to spread it evenly across that piece of cotton fabric, and you want that fabric completely saturated. Before you do this step, I should have mentioned, you probably want to press it with an iron and make sure that you don't have any wrinkles in it. It's going to make the paper lay better when we're all finished. And I'm just going to go ahead and completely soak this piece of cotton, applying that Mod Podge and water mixture. And like I said before, if you want, you can also use some PVA glue, but I do find that I like the way that the Mod Podge works for this project better. Now that our cotton is completely soaked with that mixture, we're going to take our 1 ply of napkin and very gently lay it on that cotton fabric. You don't want to rub hard. I find just patting up and down with your palms very gently, allowing that glue mixture to soak into the napkin from the fabric. Let it sit for a few seconds before we add the next layer of glue. Now for this next step, you have to be really careful. I like using a paintbrush. You can gently coat that piece of napkin, stroking from the middle out. It's going to get rid of some wrinkles that may have happened. Although with this project, sometimes we embrace the wrinkles. We don't need to have them completely gone because it does give it some character for our fabric paper. But very gently brush on this glue solution. That's why it's so important to have it watered down with that 50-50 mixture, because if we didn't, it would be too thick and it would pull and tear on the napkin. Okay, I set it aside and it took about 15 or 20 minutes to dry. It'll all depend on your weather and temperature. Now you can see it's a blend of fabric and paper, but it's flexible. You can fold it and you can use it. And I also love the one feature about it, you can sew on it. Now for this piece, I'm going to add another napkin on the other side. So it's going to be a double piece of fabric paper. We're going to apply that glue solution on the other side of the cotton the same way we did on the front, making sure it's soaking right through that fabric and applying it over the entire piece. Now those napkins or tissue paper or book pages or sewing pattern sheets that are easily tearing and hard to incorporate into your DIYs can be turned into fabric paper that's usable, durable, and versatile. You can use it in so many different ways. Now we're going to take that 1 ply of this butterfly napkin and carefully lay it into the glue on that fabric. Again, just pat really gently. You don't want to rub too hard because it's going to tear and get all those little bubbles or wrinkles out, making it lay smooth. Just take your time. I would also experiment with different types of fabric. The only thing you want to look for in a fabric when you're doing this is that it's able to absorb the glue into the fabric. You don't want a type of fabric where the glue is just going to sit on top and not soak in, because we need it to bond with the napkin or the type of paper that you're using. Let's apply that glue solution on top of the napkin again, being very gentle, ensuring we work from the middle out, and let's focus on getting any bubbles or wrinkles that might be happening. Remember, we can always embrace those imperfections, but our goal is to smooth out everything the best that we can. Now comes a satisfying part, peeling off that non-stick sheet and seeing our beautiful fabric paper that we've created. And here's our fabric paper. It's versatile for crafting. It's strong and durable. It's flexible and for easy folding. It's customizable with different fabrics, and you can also sew on it. Now I'm going to show you how you can transform this fabric paper into an envelope. I've cut it into a 12 by 12 inch square, and we're going to fold it together, and it's going to effortlessly come together. It's foldable, yet it's strong and durable, and it's going to result in a beautiful envelope. And there we have it, a beautiful envelope crafted from fabric paper. I love having the pattern on the inside, and it makes a perfect gift. Now I'm going to show you how you can do it with your custom made napkins. I have a full tutorial which I'll link here, or I'll include in the description below, so you can see how I made these. Now you can use the same technique on your custom made napkins, and I'm going to demonstrate it on a piece of muslin. I adore this rooster graphic, and it's available in my Etsy store. You can find the link in the description below or right here if you'd like to use this graphic for any of your DIY projects. That's why I always keep that second ply of napkin that we peel away, because that's what I use to create these custom made napkins. Now we're ready to apply it onto that piece of muslin using the same process. And how cute is that? I'd love to hear how you would use this in your DIY projects and what you would use it on. I'm not quite sure about mine yet, so I'm going to set it aside until I get inspired. With this one, I broke out my sewing machine and I sewed around the edges, which was so easy to do. It didn't tear or pull. Just make sure it's nice and dry before putting it through your sewing machine. Otherwise, it won't work and it would clog up your needle. Here's a little journal that I made with a fabric and added a napkin to the outside. I sewed around the edges and it created a really cute little booklet. I've included some lined paper on the inside, and it's really nice just to use this fabric paper as journal covers or book covers. So many possibilities. I also did this process on some cheesecloth, and the results were fantastic. I had an old book with some really old brittle pages, so I did the same process. I tore off the book pages made them into smaller pieces, and then I added the glue on the cheesecloth, applied the book pages, and then coated it on each side, front and back, and it created the most beautiful fabric paper. And I'm going to turn these into bookmarks. These bookmarks are perfect for my junk journals, and they're so easy to put together. I'm glad I was able to save those book pages that were so brittle and just falling apart when I touched them. Now I've given them a new life, and I also sewed around the outside of these bookmarks. I picked up this piece of fabric at the thrift store. It was $1.99. It's quite a bit of fabric, and it's cotton. You want to be using a fabric that's going to be able to absorb ink. Now you're also going to need some spray adhesive. You can get spray adhesive at any craft store. You can get it on Amazon. I'll put a link down below if you don't have any in your crafting stash to grab some. I'm cutting this fabric down to the size of a sheet of paper. And you want to make sure that you have your fabric nice and flat. So I always like to press it before I adhere it onto my piece of paper. I'm just using my iron on the highest setting with no steam and giving it a really good press to get all the wrinkles out of it. Now I've sprayed my piece of paper with the spray adhesive. Make sure you're doing it in a really well ventilated area. I actually take it outside, spray it, and then bring it back inside. And I'm going to trim all around the edges. You want to make sure you have it trimmed really well, because we're going to be putting this through our printer and we don't want any bits of fabric getting caught as it goes through. Now when I'm doing these DIY projects, I have printers that are just in my craft room, that's all I use it for. So I never have any problems if something happens when I'm trying to do some wild stuff on my printer that I haven't racked a good office printer. That being said, I've never had any issues. So we're going to load our paper into the printer, making sure that we're loading it so we print on that fabric side. This is my laser jet printer, but this will also work on an inkjet, and I'll show you next project using the inkjet printer. And this is a pattern that I printed on this fabric. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now I'm going to take my cutter and I'm just going to cut it in strips of ribbon. I'm leaving the fabric still on that paper. It makes it much easier to cut into strips. You don't want to peel that fabric off yet. And you can do any width of ribbon that you like. I think this one I did for a 1 inch. And then you just peel the paper away and you're left with a custom ribbon. This pattern is available in my Etsy store. If you want to check it out, you can grab it and you can make some of this ribbon yourself. So here we have all this beautiful ribbon ready to use on our DIY projects. I like taking my little Cricut tool and fraying the edges a little bit. Just kind of gives it that rustic feel. I always kind of love making everything look a little bit aged and rustic, and just peeling away a couple of those threads off the sides and the ends. So now with this sheet, I did the exact same process. Put the spray adhesive on a piece of paper, put some fabric on it. But this one I ran through my colored inkjet printer. My laser jet printer only prints on black ink, so I wanted to add some color. So this is on my inkjet printer. Now you have to remember that none of this is going to be washable. And if you don't want to cut these into ribbons, you can print off this sheet of fabric and incorporate that into a DIY project. Also, put a quote on it. So many possibilities. Now I'm going to cut this one into strips. Also, you can also use these if you do junk journaling, scrapbooking, mixed media. You can add these as embellishments on your pages. Absolutely beautiful. Now, if you want to design your own graphics or your own floral pattern, you can do that within Canva. They have a free program, you don't need to have the premium, that works really well for you to design some of these yourself. I'll put a link down below in the description to the Canva website. Just fool around on it, get the hang of it, and the possibilities are endless over on that website for all kinds of DIY projects. Now, if you want to make a piece of ribbon that's longer, I have some fabric glue. I just put a little bit along the edge, and then I attach the ribbon together. And of course, it's not going to be completely perfect. You're going to see the line, but these are really primitive ribbons, and I think it looks really cute when you can attach them all together, and it just gives you the option of having a longer piece. If you don't have any fabric glue, you can always use hot glue, or you could even staple it if you're using it within your junk journaling, and that would just give it a little bit of an extra effect. So here's a fast and easy way for you to custom make your own ribbon for your DIY projects. Project that I'm going to upcycle and do a fabric decoupage on the top of it. I actually found this on the side of the road, and it's structurally really good. The colors are really funky, but we're going to make it pretty again. And for this project, I'm going to be using the Chiseled Wedge by Zebra. I love their paintbrushes, and this one's perfect for this project. I'm going to paint this whole end table with 2 coats of pink chalk paint that I had left over from another project. And then when it's completely dry, I'm going to sand it down with this 220 sandpaper. And then take a damp rag and just wipe it all off. Make sure that there's no residue left on the top. The fabric that we're going to decoupage is this scarf that I found at the thrift store for $5.99. It was in the 75% off bin, and I love the pattern. The pink on the end table matched perfect with the scarf. When you are going to decoupage on top of a surface, you want to make sure you're painting underneath a lighter color. If not, it will show through on your piece of fabric and it will not look as nice. So having that light pink underneath will look really nice when we decoupage the scarf on top. Now we're going to be using a polyacrylic sealer to decoupage. You can use Mod Podge, you can use homemade Mod Podge, but I find using the polyacrylic, it's thinner and it just lays better into the material, trying to get a nice smooth surface. You also want to make sure when you're picking a fabric, you're not picking something that's really thick. A nice thin cotton, or like the scarf, or something that will be able to soak up that polyacrylic really well will work perfect when you're trying to fabric decoupage. You want to make sure you're putting on a liberal amount of the polyacrylic sealer. When you lay that fabric into that, you want it to soak right through into the top. Now, I've put a pair of gloves on, so when we get this exactly where we want it, now I've cut this piece of fabric just a little bit bigger than the top of the surface. You don't want to cut it right to size. You want the fabric to lay over the edge a little bit, and then I'm just going to smooth it out and make sure there's no bubbles and wrinkles right out to the edge. You'll know you've put enough polyacrylic sealer on if it's soaked right through the material. You want to make sure you have spread enough on the base coat that it's going to be able to come right up through the fabric. So that's what I mean by picking a fabric that's going to be absorbent and be able to take on all that polyacrylic sealer. If you're using something too thick, it will not be able to soak through. We've got all the bubbles and wrinkles out of that piece of material, and now before it dries, we're going to put a coat of the polyacrylic right on top of that fabric, making sure that we're spreading that polyacrylic right out to the edge. You want to make sure you have the polyacrylic right to the edge, even over a little bit, so it makes it easier when we're ready to take away that extra fabric. You can see how nice this water-based polyacrylic sealer spreads. I find with the Mod Podge, it's just a bit too thick to get it to spread really nice, where this will give you a nice, smooth, even coat. And next time you're at the thrift store, make sure you go over to the scrap fabric section or the bed sheet section, and you'll see all of the wonderful fabric that you can choose from to do this technique with. And what I like to do is when I find a piece of fabric, I'll take the fabric to the paint store, to Home Depot or to Lowe's, and I'll match a paint color that I love out of the fabric and just buy a little tester size, or depending on how big your project is, and match it all together. I was lucky this pink that I had left over matched this fabric perfect. We've got the first coat completely covering the whole top and then spread out to the edges a little bit. I put it outside in the sun and I let it dry completely. And now that it's dry, I'm going back with that 220 grit sandpaper and I'm just lightly sanding the top. And you'll see as you're sanding it, it's going to go really smooth. You'll see if there was any little rough kind of bubbles in it, this will take it right down smooth. I've got it all sanded down and then I wiped off any little dust or debris, and now I'm putting on a second coat, and again making sure that I'm spreading it right out to the edges. Now I think this end table needs some legs. I had these table legs in my stash, but I don't like the varnish that's on them, so I'm going to sand them right down and then attach them to the little end table. This is them all sanded down. I put some polyacrylic sealer on them. They're going to look great. I repeated this process 3 times, letting it completely dry in between each coat, and now we're ready to cut off the extra material. I'm going to cut a slit into each corner, and then we're going to get a really sharp X-Acto knife. Make sure you have a new blade so we can cut through this fabric really easy. Now this is why it was so important to take that polyacrylic right out to the edge, because it's crisp and it's dry now, and when you run the knife along the edge of it, it'll cut it nice and clean and straight. Hold that knife right straight up and down along the edge of that table and just slowly cut along, and I love this. It looks so fantastic. It's nice and neat and tidy and crisp. And again, you can see why you want to pick a fabric that's not too thick so you can get a nice clean edge when you're all finished. Now that we have all the material cut off, I'm going to take that 220 grit sandpaper again and give it one last sanding right out to the edge. If you have any little hairs of fabric that are left from cutting, this sandpaper will sand that all away, and we're going to then wipe it with a damp rag again and put on one last coat of the polyacrylic sealer, making sure that we're going right out to the edge. And that's how easy it is to decoupage fabric onto your furniture. Once the top was completely dry, I went back and I distressed the whole cabinet. I wanted a little bit of that orange to peek through because there was some orange in that fabric, and I think it was a perfect idea because it all kind of made it look like it was meant to be together. And how cute is this? A little tropical kind of boho feel end table that I created from a ugly looking table that I found on the side of the road. If you haven't tried this technique before, grab some fabric when you're out at the thrift store, and if you've got a little project you can try it on, give this a go with the polyacrylic sealer. You ever seen an old, outdated fabric chair and thought it was hopeless? Well, think again. I found this thrift store chair for just $49.99 and it was half off on this day. I'm going to show you how to turn it into a modern showpiece. Using a simple DIY paint recipe, you can completely update old fabric without spending a ton of money. So don't overlook thrift store furniture. Stay with me and I'm going to show you how to give it a whole new life. Before painting the fabric, I want to refresh the wooden parts of the chair. It has that dated orange varnish that I want to transform into a more rustic boho look. To do this, I'm using a 120 grit sandpaper to lightly sand the arms, legs, and rockers all down to the original wood. Taking the time to refresh the wood before painting the fabric is going to completely elevate the look of this chair, making it feel more modern and stylish. That glossy orange toned finish screams outdated, and removing it is a simple step that makes a huge difference in transforming this entire chair. Now the wood looks much better and that beautiful natural grain can shine through. Since we've sanded off the top coat, it's important to reseal the wood to protect it. I'm using teak oil, which not only enhances the wood's natural beauty, but it also nourishes and preserves the wood by penetrating deep into the grain. If you don't have teak oil, no worries, you can always seal it with a water-based polyacrylic sealer for a durable protective finish. Now it's time to paint. I'm using painter's tape to cover the wood and protect it for a clean finish. Since this chair isn't very big, you can grab a paint sample. Pick a color and they will tint it and mix it for you. You're also going to need some fabric softener. To prep the fabric, fill a squirt bottle with warm water and lightly mist the fabric until it's soaked through, but not drenched down to the padding. Gently rub the fabric with your hands to make sure the water is evenly distributed. This step is crucial because wetting the fabric helps the paint mixture absorb better, allowing for a smoother, more even application. The moisture helps the fabric paint bond to the fibers, making the fabric more flexible and giving it a soft, durable finish once it's dry. To make fabric paint, start by pouring a half a cup of latex paint into a bowl and then add half a cup of fabric softener. If you're working on a larger piece of furniture, aim for a 50-50 mix of latex paint and fabric softener. Now mix the two together and it will start to get nice and fluffy, exactly what you want. This fluffy texture helps the paint adhere smoothly to the fabric. Fabric softener is the key to keeping the fabric flexible. It helps the paint bond without making the fabric stiff once it dries. And before diving in, it's always a good idea to test your paint mixture on a small hidden area of the fabric first. This will let you see how the paint reacts with the material and ensure it won't cause any unexpected changes in the texture or the color. It's a simple step that can save you from any surprises later on. Now we've evenly sprayed the fabric with water, it's time to start painting. Don't worry if the first coat looks rough. It's totally normal, especially when you're painting over a dark color. This process usually takes 3, sometimes even 4 coats, so be patient. As you paint, if the fabric starts to feel dry, simply grab your squirt bottle and mist it again to keep it moist. When using fabric paint, it's best to work with natural fibers like cotton, linen, or denim, as they absorb the paint well and stay soft after drying. These fabrics hold the paint and allow it to bond smoothly. On the other hand, fabrics like polyester or nylon don't absorb paint as easily and can end up looking stiff or uneven. It's also best to avoid high pile or plush fabrics like velvet or thick upholstery with lots of texture. These fabrics can be tricky to paint because the fibers don't hold the paint evenly and it can be difficult to get in all those nooks and crannies. The results might end up looking patchy or stiff. For the best outcome, stick to smoother, tighter fabrics that allow the paint to adhere more evenly and maintain a soft, flexible finish. There are so many furniture pieces at the thrift store or on Marketplace that we often overlook because the fabric looks dated. But with just a little DIY fabric paint, you can transform an old chair into a stunning, one-of-a-kind piece for a fraction of the cost of buying new. Plus, you're being
eco-friendly and sustainable by giving furniture a second life instead of sending it to the landfill. This chair was definitely stuck in the 90s, but with a little bit of paint, time, and elbow grease, I saw the potential to turn it into something beautiful, a lasting piece for years to come. First coat is done and dry, and now it's time for the second coat. Letting the paint completely dry between coats is key for getting that smooth, even finish. As we go in with the second layer, we'll use that squirt bottle again to lightly mist the fabric, and this helps the paint glide on more easily, making it smoother and even as we cover the entire chair. Drying time usually takes between 1 and 2 hours, depending on your temperature and the humidity in your space. Rushing the drying process can result in an uneven coverage or even paint streaks, so be patient and give each layer the time it needs to set properly for the best results. Sanding between coats can really help smooth out the surface and ensure paint adheres evenly. Use a fine grit sandpaper around a 220 grit to gently sand the fabric once each coat is dry. This helps eliminate any bumps or uneven spots. For this project, I didn't need to sand because the fabric on the chair was already very smooth, but if you're working with a more textured fabric, sanding can make a big difference in achieving a flawless finish. Here's the second coat finished, and you can really see the difference, especially from the back. I'm going to finish up the second coat, let it dry completely, and then move on to the third. If I'd chosen a darker color, I probably could have gotten away with just 2 coats to cover the fabric underneath, but since I'm working with a lighter shade, 3 coats are going to be necessary to get really great coverage. It's best to mix up small batches of this fabric paint as you need it, rather than making a large amount all at once. The paint doesn't store well, and if you make too much, you might end up wasting it. By mixing just what you need for each coat, you'll ensure you'll have enough for the project and avoid having any leftover paint that doesn't keep well. After the final coat, it's important to let the chair dry completely. Give it at least 24 hours to ensure the paint has fully set and the fabric stays flexible. Do not rush this step. To care for your newly painted fabric, be gentle when cleaning. Avoid harsh scrubbing or machine washing, as this could damage the paint. Instead, spot clean with a damp cloth or use a mild fabric safe cleaner on stains. If you need to wash the fabric, hand wash it or use a delicate cycle with cold water. Here's the final result. After 3 coats of fabric paint, I've transformed this dated 90s rocking chair into a beautiful modern piece with a fun boho vibe. So next time you're thrifting and spot a piece of furniture that's seen better days, don't pass it by. If the price is right, grab it and give this technique a try. And that's it for today's transformation. I hope this DIY fabric painting technique has inspired you to tackle some of your own thrifted furniture pieces.
So here's the lampshade that I want to do. And actually the base of this lamp I found in the landfill. I can't imagine anybody getting rid of it. It is all solid wood and ornate and it's beautiful. But I want to perk up the shade, so I'm going to decoupage this bed sheet on it. I picked this bed sheet up at Value Village for $2.99 and I just love the 70s groovy feel of it, and I'm excited to get this on the lampshade. I couldn't believe when I found this bedsheet because it matches my craft pegboard perfectly. Okay, I'm going to measure the lampshade and see the width that I need the panels in. I'm not going to do this all in one piece. I'm going to decoupage separate panels on because it's easier to work with. And what's nice about this sheet is the width is exactly 2 of these squares. So I'm going to cut that for the width, and then I'm going to cut the length and then cut them into panels. Okay, I've got them all cut out in the width that I need, and now I'm going to cut them down into panels. And I'm going to do them with the 2 sections of the squares, and that'll make it so much easier when I'm decoupaging because you won't have so much fabric to work with. And that's the first panel that I'm going to start with, and you can see how it fits right on the lampshade. I'm going to iron all the panels so they're nice and smooth and easy to work with. And I'm just using a high setting of 6 and getting them nice and flat. And I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat. And when I start to decoupage, I'm going to have to push that fabric into all those pleats on the lampshade. When applying the Mod Podge, you have to use quite a bit because you want that to soak right through into the fabric so you have it adhere really well. So I'm applying a liberal amount, and I'm just going to do it in small sections. Do 4 or 5 pleats all at once and then lift it up and apply some more. And when I'm applying the first panel, I want to make sure I have the edge right in the middle of the first pleat. And I'm going to flip it up and add some more Mod Podge and just keep working away. I found as I was going along, I got a little credit card, and that worked really well to help me push it into all those pleats really well, because you want to make sure that it's bonded really well in the middle of that pleat so it doesn't pop up. And also, when I have it adhered really well in those pleats, I take some Mod Podge and I put a liberal amount on the top. And there's a first panel, all finished, and I think it looks fabulous. Okay, now I'm ready to start the second panel, and I want to make sure that I line up the patterns as best as I can, and then put that seam right in the middle of that pleat. And then add the Mod Podge on top to seal it in and keep working away again. As I'm redoing my craft room, I've kind of been drawn towards all these funky, fun, whimsical colors, and I think it helps with my creativity. What do you think? Do you like this style? Let me know down in the comments. Now when I ended this panel, I had a little bit of excess fabric that didn't fit right into the middle of the pleat. So I'm just going to trim that off so it's flush right in there and start with the next panel. Now I'm finally almost done, so I'm just going to measure up the last little bit that I need to fit in and cut it to size and decoupage it in there. I tried to line and match the patterns as best I could. It's really hard when it's a little bit of a angle on the lampshade, but it fit pretty good and it looks pretty good, and with all the pleats it kind of hides any imperfections. Decoupaging is all about having fun. It's not about having it completely perfect, and I think I am going to love this lampshade. Okay, all finished. It used quite a bit of Mod Podge, but it adhered really well and the fabric is stuck really well to the lampshade. So now I'm just going to tuck in all the pieces around the edge into the pleats and give it a nice finished look. I'm just going to trim off some of the excess fabric just so there's enough just to tuck down into the pleats so it's not really bulky. Okay, I'm going to add some Mod Podge along that little bit of fabric and tuck it right up into the pleats. And as I got going, I was trying to use my fingers, and then I realized that my scissors, the point of my scissors would poke it right up into that pleat and make it nice and smooth and finished looking. And the finished edge looks wonderful. I really like it. And now I'm just going to do the top, and we're almost there. Okay, all the ends are tucked in, and now we're ready to add the finishing touch, and this is exciting. I found this bag at the thrift store for $2, a full bag, and it is the 70s pom-pom trim, and I'm going to put it on the top and the bottom of the lampshade, and I think it's going to look fabulous. I'm just going to secure it with my hot glue gun around the top edge and the bottom edge. Okay, all finished, and let's get it on this lamp post and we can have a look and see how it fits into my craft room. And there it is, all finished. It looks exactly like how I wanted it to. It's kind of funky, eclectic, 70s vibes, and when I walk into my craft room, it just makes me happy. And that base of the lamp is unbelievable. I love it, and I'm so glad I was able to find it and rescue it and bring it here to my home.
For this technique, it's best to choose a fabric that's absorbent rather than slippery or shiny. I picked up this fabric at the thrift store. Any cotton blend will do the trick perfectly. These great graphics are in my Etsy store, and they're just perfect for this project. I've printed them on plain computer paper using my laser printer. But don't worry if you have only an inkjet printer, it'll work too. It might be a bit more tricky and the results might not be as sharp, but it's definitely worth a try. I'm going to cut them down to match the size of the fabric I want to transfer them onto. Today I'll be working on quite a few, so stick around until the end so you can see how they all turned out. If you happen to have a collection of small fabric scraps, these DIYs are perfect for using them up and adding a special touch to your various crafts. Now let's move on to transferring this photo onto the fabric. For this step, I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat. I'm applying a generous coat of the Mod Podge over the entire photo, making sure to cover it right to the edges. And then I'm going to flip it over and carefully position it exactly where I want it on the fabric. I'm going to press it down firmly to ensure that it adheres well, and we are then going to sit it aside and let it dry until the next day. Don't be afraid to get creative with this technique. It works beautifully with both photos and graphics, so let your imagination run wild. Give it a try on different fabrics and see what kind of results you get. Personally, I love to use this method to create hang tags or to incorporate into my junk journaling projects. Now that these have dried for 24 hours, it's time to reveal the transferred graphics. Grab a small dish of warm water and a soft little rag, and we're going to gently wet the paper until you can start to see the graphics show through. Be careful not to oversaturate it. Once everything is wet, it's time to remove the paper. Start by using your rag and begin in the middle, working your way outwards. Rub off the paper in gentle circular motions. You'll notice the paper starting to come off, revealing that graphic underneath. Be careful not to be too aggressive. You only want to remove that top layer of paper. Avoid rubbing the graphic itself. remove the paper, you're going to notice that it's starting to roll up and separate from the graphic. And once you've taken off that top layer, use your fingers to gently rub off the remaining paper. I find that using your fingers works best because you can feel if there's any paper residue left. It's hard to tell if you've gotten it all off just with a rag, so rely on your sense of touch to ensure that you can get all the last of that paper off with your fingertips. After you believe you've removed all of the paper and the transfer has dried, you might notice a faint white haze or residue. Don't worry. Simply use your fingertips, dip them in a little bit of water, and gently rub off any of the remaining paper. You might have to do this a few times before you get it all off. It might take a bit of time, but I personally find it's quite relaxing. I just sit back, I just rub off that paper, enjoying the moment, and I keep rubbing until that beautiful graphic shows through on the fabric. Now that I've removed all the paper, I'm going to use my Cricut weeding tool to gently fray the edges of the fabric. This will give it a rustic, primitive feel that I think suits this photo perfectly. It's a simple step, but it adds a really nice touch to the finished piece. Now that we've removed all the paper and frayed the edges, it's time to apply a top coat. I'm going to be using the Mod Podge matte, again, to completely cover the fabric and seal everything up. It's a personal preference, so you can skip this step if you prefer. I personally like the look of it. Plus it helps prevent any further fraying and keeps everything intact. If you prefer a glossy finish, you can use your Mod Podge gloss instead. For me, I prefer the Mod Podge matte that provides that perfect look. With the first one all finished, I'm going to attach it to a card. I've grabbed some scrapbooking paper, and to give it a distressed look, I'll ink around the edges. Then using the glue stick, I'm going to apply it to the front of the card. It's such a simple and easy way to create a fun DIY project that anyone would be delighted to receive. All the photo and graphic transfers on the fabric are now finished, and I'm thrilled with the way that they turned out. If you're interested in trying this technique and using these graphics, they're available in my Etsy store. I've created bookmarks and some cards and some hang tags, but the possibilities are truly endless. I'll include the link to the store below in the description. I hope you found today's tutorial on transferring photos or graphics onto fabric enjoyable. Today's DIY is a tutorial on how to print directly right on fabric. We don't have to do any iron-ons. We don't have to do any messy processes. This is really simple. And all you're going to need is some spray adhesive. I'll put a link down below in the description. There's lots of different companies that you can get spray adhesive from. I'll put an Amazon link. And we're going to need some computer paper. I've got 3 different swatches of fabric, and this one is like a t-shirt material. This is like a cotton blend material, these two, so I can show you how it works on different material. Now the first thing that you need to do is press your material. I've already gone ahead and I've pressed these 2 pieces and they're ready to go. Next thing we need is I've got 3 sheets of computer paper, just regular paper, and our spray adhesive. I'm going to take this outside and spray just one side of the paper with this spray adhesive. This stuff is really stinky. You want to do it in a really well ventilated area or outside. And then I'll bring it back in and we'll attach our fabric to it. I've got the spray adhesive on the paper. It's nice and sticky. We're going to lay that fabric right on to that piece of paper. You want to get it centered and make sure your pattern is where you want it. Flip it over and we're going to cut off the extra. Now we're going to do the next one. I think this might be easier if we put the paper onto the fabric than the fabric onto the paper. Make sure you have it lined up where you want it. And press it down really firmly, trim off the extra. And the last one, the t-shirt material. And we're going to trim off around the edges. We now have 3 pieces of paper that have spray adhesive on them, and we have attached the fabric and cut around the edges. We're ready to put this through the printer.
When putting these through the printer, you want to make sure you're feeding them through so it's going to be printed on the fabric. You can use this process with a laser jet or an inkjet printer. I do lots of DIY projects and I put things through my printer other than paper. I've never had any problems with it getting jammed up. That being said, I have just a cheap little inkjet printer that I use only in my crafting room, just in case something does happen. I haven't ruined a really expensive printer. And I always recommend that when you're crafting. So we're gonna get started. I'm gonna pick out some graphics that I want to print on the fabric. We're gonna load this into the printer. It feeds printing from this way. And we're gonna hit print. And then you just have to peel the fabric off the paper and you have a perfect graphic on a piece of fabric that you can use on any of your DIY projects. I also printed off this one, which I think turned out really cute. And I had this embroidery hoop that I've had for forever in my stash. I'm gonna put this in the middle of it and turn it into a little wall hanging. Gonna embellish it with a little bit of greenery on the top and cut off the extra. And that's how you can easily print on a piece of fabric. And you can imagine all the possibilities that you can do with this technique. This faux batik technique works best on cotton. I have these two pieces off an old pillowcase that I'm going to show you the technique. Now to create this faux batik effect, all you need is flour. We're going to incorporate half a cup of warm water and half a cup of flour together, mixing it really well, making sure that there's no lumps. We want to, in the end, have it like a pancake consistency. If you need to add a little bit more flour to get that, then you can just add it together in small increments. And then you're just going to paint that flour mixture all over that piece of cotton, making sure you go right out to the edge and try to get it as even as you can. And you want to make sure that you put it on quite thick so you cannot see the fabric. I've got it completely covered. I'm going to set it outside in the sun and we're going to let it dry really well. I coated the other piece and I'm just showing you how you can put designs in it. You can use a fork, you can use the end of a paintbrush, because when you're creating designs in it, it's letting the fabric show through. So when we go to color it, it will seep through in more areas and just give you a little bit more of a different look. Both of these are outside in the bright sun. It's going to take a little bit for them to dry. I'll be back when they're all ready. They're about halfway through drying and I want to take them off the wax paper. So I'm just peeling it off and then I'm going to put it back on that piece of wood and put it out in the sun so it can dry. The wax paper was preventing it from drying from the underneath. So peel that off and we're going to set it outside. It's a few hours later. They're completely dry. I like to add a little bit more crackling. You can see that there's some that's already started in it, but I just like to gently just kind of crunch it up a little bit to add a few more. And make sure before you do this step that it is completely dry. You don't want to have it still damp or you'll have a mucky mess. Now, as a substitute of using fabric dye, we're going to use acrylic paint because when acrylic paint dries, it is permanent. So I've got a little bit of water in my paint palette and you really want to water down that acrylic paint. You don't want it really thick. And then just brush it right onto your piece of fabric into that flour. You want it watered down enough so it's going to seep into those crackles and then get down to the fabric. And the resist is the flour. Wherever there's the flour, the acrylic paint is not going to soak through, but where there's crackles, the acrylic paint is going to seep right through into that fabric. I'm going to do 4 different colors on this piece of fabric so I can show you how it blends in together and how it will react to different colors. I'm, again, just watering it down really well, and you have to almost push your paintbrush into those cracks and make sure that it's leaching right through and you have enough water incorporated into it. Now for the other piece of fabric, I'm going to do this brown color. Again, I've watered it right down and I'm pressing it quite hard right into that piece of fabric so it goes into all those little nooks and crannies and cracks. And then once we have this all coated, I'm going to take both of those pieces of fabric, and again, we're going to put it out in this full sun where it's nice and hot and let that acrylic paint dry really well. I've set them outside, and you can tell if you've got enough paint on it. If you can pick it up and you can see the paint on the bottom side that it's come through. Look at the texture on that. This one's going to be really amazing. This is a couple hours later and they're completely dry, and you can want to make sure that it's dry from the front and the back. It's going to be crispy again. That's what you're looking for. And the same with this brown one. It's nice and dry, and look at all the texture on the back of that. Fantastic. I'm excited to show you guys how this is going to turn out. I have just some warm water in a bucket, and I'm just going to put that first piece of fabric right in there. And what's going to happen is that water is going to soak off all of that flour and just leave the acrylic paint in the cracks and wherever there wasn't any flour, and it's going to leave this really neat grainy texture on this piece of fabric. And if you have a creative mind like me, you can imagine all of the possibilities. You can draw pictures with flour onto fabric and then do this technique. You can do so many different designs on it, so many different color combinations. Anything that is like a nice cotton fabric will work. Now we're going to put in this second piece of fabric, and again, just let that flour soak off. And this piece of fabric is almost giving me almost like a Western feel, kind of like a aged leather. I got all the flour cleaned off both pieces of fabric, and I put them out in the sun and let them dry completely, and this is the final result. I think the design that you can create on fabric with just flour is so much fun. And I know if you're like me, you have all kinds of acrylic paint that you can experiment with and mix and mingle colors together on fabric. You can incorporate these pieces of fabric into so many DIY projects: scrapbooking, mixed media, junk journaling. The possibilities are endless.